I was helping a customer at my small boutique when my phone buzzed. It was a text from my husband. "I'm leaving you. I emptied our account. Have fun paying the bills without me." What he didn't know was that the luxury house he was taking his mistress to, it was actually an MY name. I never saw it coming. Or maybe I just didn't want to. After 12 years of marriage, building a small business from scratch, and supporting him through 3 career changes, my husband Mark decided I wasn't good enough anymore. He left me with nothing but a text message and empty bank accounts. He thought he had it all figured out, the perfect escape with his 24-year-old coworker. But there was one crucial detail he overlooked, something that would change everything. This is the story of how I lost everything in one day, and then watched him lose it all 1 month later. I remember exactly what I was wearing when my world fell apart. My favorite blue dress, and the pearl earrings he'd given me for our 10th anniversary. The boutique was quiet that Tuesday afternoon. Just one elderly customer browsing the scarves section. When my phone buzzed, I assumed it was my supplier confirming tomorrow's delivery. Instead, it was Mark, ending our marriage in fewer characters than a Twitter post. My hands started shaking so badly I had to sit down. The customer must have noticed something was wrong, because she came over and touched my shoulder. "Are you all right, dear?" she asked. I wasn't. I couldn't breathe. I called Mark immediately, but it went straight to voicemail. I tried again and again, leaving increasingly desperate messages. This had to be some kind of terrible joke or mistake. We'd had breakfast together that morning. He'd kissed me goodbye at the door. I closed the shop early and drove home in a daze, running through our recent conversations for warning signs I might have missed. Had he seemed distant lately? Yes. Had he been working unusual hours? Also yes. But I'd attributed it to stress from his new position. I never imagined he was planning his escape, calculating exactly how to hurt me the most. When I pulled into our driveway, I realized his car was gone. Inside, the house felt different. I walked from room to room, noting what was missing. His clothes, his laptop, the vintage watch collection he'd inherited from his father, and most devastatingly, the photo albums from our early years together. It wasn't just that he'd left. He'd erased himself from our home, as if trying to pretend those years never existed. I sank onto our bed, my bed now, and did something I rarely allowed myself. I completely fell apart. For hours, I alternated between sobbing and staring blankly at the ceiling, wondering how someone I trusted completely could betray me so thoroughly. It wasn't until evening that I remembered to check our joint accounts. When I logged in, the blood drained from my face. Our savings account, $42,000 we'd been setting aside for years, completely empty. Our checking account, $17.28 remaining. Even our joint credit card had been maxed out with a $5,000 cash advance taken that morning. He hadn't just left me emotionally devastated. He'd left me financially ruined. Or so he thought. What Mark didn't realize in his hasty exit was that some things can't be emptied with a few clicks on a banking app. Some assets aren't so easily transferred. And the most valuable asset we owned, our home, had something very interesting on its deed. Mark and I met in college, during my final year of business school. He was charming, ambitious, and seemed genuinely interested in my dreams of opening my own boutique. Unlike other men I'd dated, he never seemed intimidated by my drive or intelligence. Instead, he positioned himself as my biggest supporter. "You're going to be amazing," he'd tell me, as we stayed up late working on my business plan. "I've never met anyone as determined as you." Those words meant everything to me back then, a young woman still struggling to believe in herself. What I didn't understand was that it's easy to support someone's dreams when they're still just dreams on paper. The early years of our marriage were beautiful but challenging. While I worked 60-hour weeks getting my boutique off the ground, Mark bounced between jobs, never quite finding his passion. I didn't mind supporting us financially. I believed in partnership, in taking turns lifting each other up. "Your time will come," I'd reassure him after each job change or career disappointment. I believed in him completely, even when others questioned his commitment. My parents especially were concerned. "He seems to quit just when things get difficult," my father observed during one holiday dinner. I defended Mark fiercely, insisting he was simply finding his way. In reality, I was ignoring the pattern that would eventually define our marriage. When my boutique finally started turning a profit in our 5th year of marriage, something shifted between us. Mark became more engaged, more interested in our business. He suggested expansions, renovations, even opening a second location. His enthusiasm was flattering, but something about it felt off. Looking back now, I realize what had changed. I had become valuable to him, not as a wife or partner, but as a financial asset. This became clearer when we decided to buy our house. The market was competitive, and we'd lost 3 bids already. Then Mark's uncle, a real estate attorney, suggested putting the house solely in my name. "Your credit score is better," Mark explained. "And my uncle says we might get a better interest rate this way." I was hesitant at first. Shouldn't our largest asset be jointly owned? But Mark insisted it was just a technicality, a strategic move to secure our dream home. "We'll add my name to the deed later," he promised. But somehow that never happened. There was always a reason to delay. The timing wasn't right, the fees were too high. We should wait until after his next career change. I stopped bringing it up eventually, not wanting to seem untrusting. After all, what did it really matter whose name was on the paperwork? We were married. What was mine was his. Or so I thought. I never imagined that this technicality would become the linchpin of everything that followed. The first concrete evidence of Mark's affair arrived 2 days after he left, though the signs had been there for months. A neighbor stopped by with a casserole. Word travels fast in small communities, and mentioned seeing Mark with his assistant several times at the local hotel. "I assumed it was work-related," she said, unable to meet my eyes. I thanked her for the food and shut the door, leaning against it as the pieces clicked into place. The late meetings, the weekend work emergencies, the new cologne, the sudden interest in fitness. Classic signs I'd been too trusting to acknowledge, or perhaps too afraid to see what was right in front of me. That night, I did something I'd never done before. I logged into Mark's email. We'd shared passwords years ago and never changed them. Another sign of the trust I'd given so freely. His inbox told the story more clearly than any confession could. Hundreds of messages between him and someone named Amber. Hotel reservations, screenshots of apartment listings, flight confirmations for a vacation to Bali, scheduled during what was supposed to be his business conference next month. They'd been planning their new life together for at least 6 months, methodically organizing every detail, while I remained completely oblivious. The most painful email was the oldest, from Amber to Mark. "She'll never suspect a thing. You said she's too trusting." The following morning, I received a call from our bank's fraud department. Someone had attempted to remove my name from our investment account, an account Mark apparently hadn't drained yet. "We required both signatures for this type of change," the representative explained. "Is this something you authorized?" It wasn't, of course. Mark had forged my signature, but sloppily, using his right hand when he knew I was left-handed. The representative advised me to place a freeze on all my accounts immediately. "This happens more often than you'd think in divorce situations," she said kindly. "Let's make sure your remaining assets are protected." Her words sparked something in me, a realization that I needed to stop reacting and start acting. I spent the next 3 days in a flurry of activity, consulting with a divorce attorney, changing the locks on the house and boutique, and documenting every financial transaction from the past year. My attorney, a formidable woman named Eleanor, who specialized in high-conflict divorces, reviewed our situation with clinical precision. "The house is legally yours alone," she confirmed, studying the deed. "And the funds he took, that's considered marital asset dissipation." She looked up at me, a small smile forming. "You know, sometimes the people who think they're being clever actually make the biggest mistakes. Your husband has created a very problematic legal situation for himself." For the first time since receiving that text, I felt a glimmer of something beyond pain. Not quite hope yet, but its quieter cousin, possibility. The week after Mark left was a masterclass in adulting through crisis. By day, I kept the boutique running, greeting customers with a smile that never reached my eyes. By night, I transformed into a financial detective, tracking every dollar he'd taken and documenting every asset we owned. The process was both devastating and enlightening. I discovered Mark had been siphoning small amounts from our accounts for months, preparing his escape fund while I remained blissfully unaware. But I also discovered something about myself. Beneath the heartbroken wife was a surprisingly resourceful woman with excellent record-keeping habits. Every major purchase we'd made over 12 years, I had the receipts, literally and figuratively. My attorney advised me to temporarily freeze the mortgage payments on our house, which was legally within my rights, given the financial emergency Mark had created. "We'll file for an emergency hearing regarding the emptied accounts," she explained. "In the meantime, preserve what capital you have." She also suggested I contact all our credit card companies to report unauthorized charges, a step that would later prove critical. Most importantly, she advised me not to contact Mark directly. "Let him think you're still reeling," she said. "The element of surprise will be your greatest advantage." This advice ran counter to my every instinct, which was to call and demand answers, to scream and cry and ask why. But I forced myself to trust her expertise. Meanwhile, I took stock of my actual financial situation. The boutique was profitable, though modestly so. I had a small personal savings account Mark didn't know about. Nothing substantial, just about $8,000 I'd been setting aside for eventually expanding the store. My car was paid off. And most significantly, I had no debt in my name alone. The credit cards Mark had maxed out were joint accounts, which complicated things legally, but also meant I wasn't solely responsible for them. The house was underwater due to a recent market downturn, but it was mine. As I compiled this information for my attorney, a strange feeling began to take root. I wasn't destitute. Damaged, yes. Betrayed, absolutely. But not without resources. 3 weeks after Mark's departure, I received a text from an unknown number. "This is Amber. We need to talk about the house." I almost dropped my phone. The audacity was breathtaking. After consulting with my attorney, I responded with a simple, "All communication must go through my lawyer. Here's her contact information." Within hours, my lawyer called, barely containing her amusement. "So," she began, "it seems Mark told his girlfriend the house was his, and he'd be able to move her in immediately. He didn't mention it was solely in your name. They've already given notice on their respective apartments." I felt a surge of something unfamiliar, something that felt dangerously close to satisfaction. "What happens now?" I asked. Eleanor's response was one I'll never forget. "Now we educate them on property law." Exactly 1 month after Mark walked out, I received formal correspondence from an attorney representing him. The letter was a study in audacious demands. Mark wanted half the value of our house, continued access to his boutique's financial accounts, and most incredibly, alimony due to his contributions to my business success. I read the letter 3 times, each reading stoking a different emotion. First shock, then hurt, and finally gloriously anger. Not the destructive kind that burns everything in its path, but the clarifying kind that burns away illusions. For years, I'd shaped myself around Mark's needs and moods. I'd made myself smaller to make him feel bigger. That ended today. My response, crafted with Eleanor's guidance, was concise and devastating. We included documentation of the emptied accounts, credit card statements showing purchases clearly meant for his new relationship, and most crucially, the house deed bearing only my name. We also included a separate filing for divorce on grounds of adultery, with time-stamped evidence from his own email account. "We're not just playing defense," Eleanor explained as we reviewed the documents. "We're establishing the narrative from the beginning. He abandoned the marriage, took marital assets, and committed financial fraud. The boutique would never be part of negotiations. It had been established before our marriage with an inheritance from my grandmother, a fact documented in our prenuptial agreement Mark had likely forgotten signing." 2 days later, Mark showed up at the boutique just before closing time. I was helping my newest employee stock shelves when the bell above the door jingled. I turned, customer service smile in place, and felt it freeze on my face. He looked different somehow, less substantial, as if the Mark I'd known had been partially erased. "We need to talk," he said, ignoring my employee completely. "Privately." For a moment, I was that desperate woman again, the one who'd called him 20 times the day he left. But only for a moment. "I'm working," I replied, my voice steady. "My lawyer's contact information hasn't changed." He stepped closer, lowering his voice. "This isn't about lawyers. This is about us. What we built together." The irony was almost beautiful. I asked my employee to finish up and head home early. Once we were alone, Mark switched tactics immediately. "You're being ridiculous," he hissed. "Half of everything we have is legally mine." I studied him curiously, this stranger wearing my husband's face. "You left," I said simply. "You emptied our accounts. You maxed out our credit cards. You moved in with another woman. Which part of that entitles you to more?" His face flushed. "I built that boutique with you. I supported you when no one else would." This was his version of history, one where his periodic encouragement outweighed my 1,000-hour workweeks. I almost laughed. Instead, I picked up my keys and moved toward the door. "The house is in my name," I said, holding the door open for him. "You have 30 days to collect any remaining personal items, supervised by appointment only." His face contorted with fury. "This isn't over," he threatened. I finally allowed myself to smile. "You're right about that." The divorce proceedings unfolded like a slow-motion car crash. Painful to watch, but impossible to look away from. Mark's initial confidence crumbled as reality set in. His attorney, a slick man with an expensive watch and dismissive attitude, had clearly been fed a fictional version of our marriage and assets. During our first mediation session, I watched the exact moment this attorney realized his client had lied about nearly everything. "The house is solely in Mrs. Turner's name," Eleanor stated, sliding the deed across the table. "Purchased with her inheritance down payment, which was protected in their prenuptial agreement." The attorney's eyes flicked to Mark, whose face had turned an interesting shade of gray. This pattern would repeat throughout the day. Eleanor presenting documentation, Mark's attorney looking increasingly strained, and Mark himself shrinking in his chair. The most dramatic moment came when Eleanor presented the bank records, showing the systematic emptying of our accounts. "We filed these transactions as marital asset dissipation," she explained calmly. "The court typically orders these funds returned, often with penalties." Mark's attorney leaned over to whisper something to him, and Mark's response was loud enough for everyone to hear. "Well, I don't have it anymore." The room fell silent. I studied my soon-to-be ex-husband, wondering what had happened to the shrewd, calculating man who'd orchestrated his escape so carefully. It seemed he hadn't planned beyond the leaving. The money he'd taken, our life savings, had apparently vanished in just 4 weeks. Later, we would discover exactly where it went. Luxury hotels, expensive restaurants, designer clothing for Amber, and the down payment on a sports car Mark had always wanted. As the legal process continued, a curious shift occurred in my daily life. While Mark became increasingly desperate, calling mutual friends for loans, selling his expensive watch collection, even trying to return the sports car, I found myself flourishing. The boutique saw increased business, partly due to sympathy traffic. Small towns and their gossip networks have their advantages, but also because I was innovating again. Without Mark's constant suggestions and criticisms, I trusted my instincts more. I expanded our online presence, introduced a personal shopping service, and collaborated with local artisans. Each small success felt like reclaiming a piece of myself. Each profitable day was a quiet rebuttal to Mark's assumption that I would collapse without him. 3 months into the divorce process, Mark's attorney requested another mediation session. Eleanor warned me that this likely meant they were ready to make concessions. "They're running out of delaying tactics," she explained, "and probably money for legal fees." She was right. Mark's offer was surprisingly reasonable. He would relinquish all claims to the house and boutique in exchange for a one-time payment significantly smaller than what he'd originally demanded. After consulting with Eleanor, I agreed to an even smaller amount, paid over 5 years with specific conditions attached. As we signed the preliminary agreement, I noticed Mark couldn't meet my eyes. "Amber left, didn't she?" I asked quietly as our attorneys discussed logistics. He flinched as if I'd slapped him. He didn't need to answer. His expression confirmed what I'd suspected. She'd signed up for luxury and excitement, not legal battles and financial struggle. I felt no satisfaction in this knowledge, only a dull sadness for all the wasted years and broken promises. 6 months after that devastating text message, my life had transformed in ways I never could have predicted. The divorce was finalized, the boutique was thriving, and I developed a new morning routine that didn't involve checking if Mark was happy with me. Simple things became revelatory. Choosing paint colors without considering someone else's preferences. Staying up late reading without being made to feel guilty. Inviting friends over spontaneously. I redecorated the house room by room, exorcising memories and creating spaces that reflected only my taste. The master bedroom became a peaceful retreat in blues and greens. The home office, formerly Mark's domain, transformed into a creative studio for designing new boutique displays. Each change felt like reclaiming territory, like planting a flag in soil that had always been mine. The financial lessons I learned through this ordeal became the foundation for a new approach to my life and business. I diversified my banking with multiple accounts at different institutions. I improved the boutique's bookkeeping systems and hired a part-time accountant. I began building a proper emergency fund, one that could sustain me for a full year if necessary. Most importantly, I stopped minimizing my financial intelligence. For years, I'd downplayed my business acumen around Mark, pretending certain decisions were lucky guesses rather than calculated risks. I'd made myself seem more financially dependent than I was, believing this somehow made me a more supportive wife. Never again would I diminish my capabilities to make someone else comfortable. The emotional rebuilding proved more challenging than the practical aspects. Trust once shattered doesn't reassemble easily. I worked with a therapist who specialized in betrayal trauma, slowly processing the anger and grief that would occasionally ambush me in quiet moments. "You're mourning 2 losses," she explained during one particularly difficult session. "The relationship you had and the relationship you thought you had." This distinction helped enormously. I wasn't just grieving the end of my marriage. I was grieving the realization that my marriage had never been what I believed it was. This clarity didn't erase the pain, but it helped me locate it properly, not as a reflection of my worth, but as the natural response to discovering a fundamental deception. Perhaps the most unexpected development came through the community that rallied around me. Women I barely knew brought food during those first terrible weeks. Former customers became friends, checking in regularly and promoting the boutique to their networks. 3 women in similar situations formed an informal support group that met monthly for dinner and wine. During one of these gatherings, someone suggested I share my financial management strategies with the group. "You handled everything so intelligently," she said. "Most of us wouldn't know where to begin." What started as casual advice over dinner eventually evolved into a workshop series I hosted after hours at the boutique. Financial intelligence for difficult transitions. Nothing fancy, just practical information about documentation, asset protection, and rebuilding credit. The first workshop filled up within hours of being announced. The second had a waiting list. Somewhere between explaining credit freezes and emergency fund strategies, I realized I'd found something unexpected in the wreckage of my marriage. A new purpose. Almost exactly 1 year after Mark's exit, I received a LinkedIn message that would change everything again. The sender was a financial magazine writer, researching a feature on small businesses that thrived after personal setbacks. Someone had mentioned my boutique and workshop series as a potential profile subject. "Your story resonates with our readers' interest in resilience and reinvention," the message explained. I hesitated before responding. Did I want my personal tragedy showcased nationally, even in the context of success? After careful consideration, I agreed to an interview with certain boundaries. No photos of my home, minimal details about Mark, and an emphasis on the business strategies rather than the emotional drama. The writer agreed enthusiastically, explaining that their focus was precisely on the practical aspects of recovery. The resulting article, titled After the Fall, Small Business Resilience, featured profiles of 3 entrepreneurs, with my story given the most prominent placement. The writer captured exactly what I'd hoped. Not a revenge narrative, but a resurrection story. The piece detailed specific steps I'd taken to secure assets, rebuild finances, and transform personal knowledge into community support. The response was immediate and overwhelming. My workshop registration filled for months ahead. The boutique's online store saw traffic triple overnight. Local business organizations invited me to speak at events. But the most meaningful responses came in private messages from women in similar situations, thanking me for providing a roadmap through their own financial devastation. One message particularly stood out. I was ready to give up everything just to make the pain stop. Your story showed me I have options. As my professional life expanded in unexpected directions, I began receiving inquiries about franchising the boutique concept or expanding to other locations. These opportunities were tempting, but required careful consideration. I'd learned valuable lessons about growth and partnership, namely, that faster isn't always better, and that maintaining control of my vision was non-negotiable. I assembled an advisory team of women entrepreneurs I respected, meeting quarterly to discuss strategic decisions. With their guidance, I developed a 5-year expansion plan that felt both ambitious and sustainable. The first new location would open in the neighboring town next spring, with a dedicated space for financial workshops built into the floor plan. Each step forward felt deliberate and authentic in a way my previous life had not. The final unexpected twist arrived on a Tuesday afternoon, almost 2 years after the text that ended my marriage. I was interviewing candidates for the new store manager position when my phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. I saw the article. It read, "Congratulations on everything. I'm sorry for how things ended." It was Mark. After the initial shock, I felt nothing. No anger, no satisfaction, no lingering pain. Just a calm acknowledgement of a message from someone who once held importance in my life. I didn't respond immediately, finishing my interviews before considering whether to reply at all. That evening, I composed a simple message. "Thank you. I hope you're well." And I meant it. Not because I'd forgiven the betrayal, but because I'd moved so far beyond it that forgiveness had become irrelevant. His actions, once the defining catastrophe of my life, had been transformed into merely the catalyst for a journey that was entirely mine. Looking back on this journey from devastation to reinvention, I'm struck by how completely our darkest moments can transform us when we refuse to be defined by them. That text message was meant to end my story. Instead, it became the first sentence of a much better one. The house that was meant to be my prison of debt became my sanctuary. The skills I developed out of necessity became the foundation for helping others. The community I feared would judge me became my strongest support system, not because I was special or uniquely capable, but because I made one crucial decision: to face reality exactly as it was, rather than as I wished it to be. What would your better story look like? Perhaps you're standing in the aftermath of betrayal right now, trying to imagine how anything good could possibly emerge from such pain. Or maybe you're in a relationship where you've made yourself smaller, dimmed your light to avoid outshining someone else. Wherever you find yourself, I want you to consider this. The skills that help you survive difficult people are often the exact same skills that can transform your life once those people are gone. Your capacity for loyalty? Redirect it to yourself. Your talent for problem solving? Apply it to your own dreams. Your patience with others' flaws? Extend some to yourself as you rebuild. The workshops I now teach focus on practical steps, documenting assets, understanding credit, building emergency funds. But the real lesson transcends finance. It's about reclaiming your power in every area where it's been surrendered. It's about recognizing that resilience isn't just bouncing back. It's bouncing forward into something better than before. For me, that meant creating not just a more profitable business, but a more authentic life. One where my success isn't measured against someone else's expectations, but against my own evolving vision. One where setbacks are viewed not as punishments, but as redirections towards something more aligned with who I'm becoming. Have you ever wondered what might be possible if you directed all the energy you've spent pleasing others, managing difficult relationships, or recovering from betrayal toward your own growth instead? The transformation can be astonishing. I've seen it not just in my life, but in the lives of dozens of women who've attended my workshops. Women who arrived believing they were financially illiterate, only to discover they had remarkable business instincts. Women who thought they needed to be rescued, only to become their own most reliable advocates. Women who believed their stories ended with abandonment, only to discover they had barely begun the most exciting chapters. Has this story resonated with you? If you've ever found yourself rebuilding from betrayal or reimagining your life after loss, I'd love to hear your experience in the comments below. Your journey might be exactly what someone else needs to read today. And if you're currently navigating your own unexpected plot twist, subscribe and hit the notification bell for more stories and strategies on transforming setbacks into comebacks. Remember, someone else's decision to leave your story doesn't have the power to end it, unless you give them that power. Your next chapter is waiting to be written, and I have a feeling it might be your best one yet.